one purpose, to get rid of Viktor Yanukovych. How do we know that? Because Joe Biden called Viktor Yanukovych in person and said, you got to go. I don't mean to get angry, but come on, man. What is regime change policy? We've never had regime change policy. Why did Biden get on the phone and tell Yanukovych he has to go? That's regime change policy, literally, writ large, big letters. And he left. But now what happened? You created this mess. You've empowered these Nazis, and they're now in charge. Now, people say, oh, yeah, but Scott, they're minorities, man. They're just, okay, yeah, they had the violence in the Maidan and all that. But at the end of the day, when they ran for parliament, they didn't get majorities in parliament. Well, you know what? Who else didn't have a majority? The Bolsheviks. You go back and study Russian history, you got these two major elements. You got the Mensheviks, which means small, and the Bolsheviks, which means big. But the Mensheviks are actually big, and the Bolsheviks are actually small. Why did the Bolsheviks win? Because they were violent. They were violent. And so now you've empowered these Bandera-worshiping neo-Nazis to come in and seize power, and they're not going to let it go. They immediately intimidate the Ukrainian Rada to start passing laws that empower nationalism, Ukrainian nationalism, at the expense of Russian-speaking Ukrainians and ethnic Russians. They outlaw the language, they outlaw the culture, and then they violently seek to impose their will. They go down to Odessa, city on the coast. There's a riot there after a soccer game. They throw 150 pro-Russian demonstrators into the House of Culture, then set it on fire. Over 40 people die. The Russians are enraged. The Ukrainians start to make a move towards Crimea, and the Russian government says, not so fast. They send in the little green men, and Russia takes control of Crimea, blocking them. But where do the Nazis go from there? They head straight to the Donbass. They start assaulting the Russian population there. The Russians rose up. They declared independence. A curious fact, Vladimir Putin didn't recognize them as independent states. He rejected that. He said, no, you're part of Ukraine. We have to respect the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine, but we will support you in your effort to defend your rights. And so thus began the Ukrainian civil war in the Donbass, where the Ukrainian army, backed by these neo-Nazi military units, trying to forcefully impose themselves on a Russian population that rejects being manhandled by the Ukrainians. They form independent militias that are supported by the Russians. And now we have a war, a civil war. And it's a horrible war. It breaks down into front lines. And here's the nature of the fighting. Viktor Poroshenko, a president that came in after a series, he's the president before Zelensky, gave a speech. And he says, let me tell you what's going to happen. He's talking to the people of Donbass. Our kids, meaning Ukrainian kids, are going to go to kindergarten. Then they're going to go to the store, and they're going to go to the park, and they're going to have a normal life. Your kids are going to be cowering in the basements while we shell you every single day. You want to know why the Russians are mad? Because that's the life that these Russians were subjected to. 14,000 people lost their lives in the course of 8 years. Non-stop violence. It could have come to an end. In 2015, something called the Normandy format, that was the Germans, the French, the Ukrainian government got together with the Russians there as observers, and they agreed to a ceasefire and keeping the Donbass in Ukraine, but that the legislation of Ukraine would pass a series of laws that gave sort of a special autonomous status to the Russians so that they wouldn't be impacted by the anti-Russian laws that had been passed. A very reasonable thing. But when Poroshenko tried to implement it, these neo-Nazis, remember this minority, told him, if you do that, we will kill you. Again, we're talking about what the definition of an insurrection is. Imagine somebody telling Joe Biden, if you sign that legislation, I'm going to kill you. The Secret Service would be all over that person. That would be the last you ever heard of him, rightfully so. But here the Nazi says, you sign it, you die. So guess what happens? He doesn't sign it. Zelensky comes in on a platform of peace, and he wants to implement Minsk. But he was told, not just told, they made a videotape of this where the guy basically says to the videotape, if he signs it, he'll be hanging by the neck until dead on some major Kiev thoroughway. And it's the truth. If Zelensky signed it, he'd be hanging by the neck until dead. Who runs Ukraine? It's not Zelensky. It's not the parliament. It's the Nazis. And if you're a Russian, and I'm going to leave it with this, because this is the emotional part. You thought losing 14,000 people was emotional. I'm going to give you what emotional is. Emotional is losing 23 to 32 million people in a war against Nazi Germany. That is what defines Russia today. Every major town, every major city has a monument to the people who died. Every family lost people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a dozen, 20 in that war. The biggest holiday in Russia is May 9th, Victory Day. It's not like in America. When was the last time the United States celebrated Victory in Europe Day? Never, not in our memory. We forgot about it. We don't have any more World War II veterans. They're all dead or dying. But the Russians, they're dead and dying too. You know how they remember it? They formed something called the Immortal Regiment. So the family members of those veterans carry the portraits of the people who fought in that war, and they parade by the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands every May 9th in remembrance of this. It's in their DNA. And now you're asking them to sit back and watch the Nazi ideology come to life in Ukraine and do nothing about it. In America, I'm sick and tired of hearing Americans saying denazification, which is one of the military objectives set forth by Vladimir Putin. It's a myth. It's a joke. It's nothing.
No,
it's
Scott,
an excuse. It's as real as it gets, man. It's as real as it gets.